Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to call to order the 72nd annual meeting of Alaska USA Federal Credit Union. Let the record reflect that we have a quorum attending. I am Bobby Alexander, Chairman of the Board of Directors, and at this time, I would like to welcome and thank each of you for your attendance. For this meeting, I would like to appoint Jesse Graham as parliamentarian and Lori Moore as recording secretary. Let me introduce the other members of your board of directors who are attending this meeting. We have Ron Lee, first vice chairman. Jerry Whacker, second vice chairman. Kent Berthume, secretary treasurer. Rich Holly, director. Lauren Skinner, director. And Radine Turner, director. Members of your supervisor committee attending virtually are Craig Wood, chairman. Catherine Wood, secretary, Jody Allen, John Hogue, and Sarah Warrington. I would also like to introduce some members of the credit union's management staff. Jeff Lunsfeld, president and CEO, and Wayne Bailey, executive vice president and chief experience officer. The annual meeting agenda report and last year's annual meeting minutes have been provided via the credit union's website. Are there any additions, deletions, or corrections to these minutes? Unless there are objections, the minutes will be approved. Seeing no objections, the minutes are approved. At this time, I would like to ask Jeff Lunsfeld to make a few comments regarding the credit union's performance in 2020. Jeff?
Thank you, Bobby. As Bobby mentioned, I'm Jeff Lundfelt, and I have the honor and privilege of serving as the President and CEO of Alaska USA Federal Credit Union. Before I get into my comments on the financial and operating performance of the credit union, I think it's important to just talk about the pandemic for a moment and the credit union's epic, brilliant response to the pandemic. It was only possible because of years of planning. As you see, Alaska USA has been no stranger to adversity. We've dealt with volcanoes, we've dealt with earthquakes, and we've been planning for pandemics since SARS, the swine flu, avian bird flu. And we knew this was coming, we just didn't know when. But we had plans in place, and those plans were executed, quite frankly, flawlessly, to be able to continue to provide exceptional service to our members, whether it was digitally, over the phone, or even through our branches that were quickly equipped with plexiglass barriers and social distancing barriers and providing all sorts of extra equipment to make sure that everyone was safe and secure during the pandemic. And that all goes to the mission of Alaska USA, which is to ensure that we're providing that quality service to our members. Now we do this because it's our primary objective as a financial services cooperative. That's to maximize the value of the credit union to its member owners. Those are the shareholders of this organization. Most important things that we look at as an organization to achieve this objective are our service delivery, our value and the product and price that we deliver, the convenience of the service that we deliver, and ultimately the organizational durability that we're in here for the long haul. Now we measure success through two primary things as it relates to the primary objectives of the credit union, the service and the value. The Member Service Survey is an organizational approach to ensuring that we have quality service delivered through our telephone center as well as through our branches. And every month, we have a random number of members surveyed that provide us with the quality of service results that you're going to see on the next slide. And what they do is when they are called on the phone and they're provided a response of what their last service experience was, they rate us on a scale of 1 to 5, 1 for poor, all the way up through 5 at excellent. And they're asked the question, was the service that they experienced prompt? Was the person helpful and courteous? Was the person knowledgeable? Were they professional? And ultimately, what was their overall experience? And I'm really pleased to report that last year, we had a record as it relates to this survey. You'll see here on this slide, in the yellow periods, the yellow boxes denote a record period, that last year we finished the year at 4.41. And that was in the midst of handling this global pandemic. With 3 record months combined with the other excellent scores, this is a record for the organization that we should all be proud of. As it relates to value transfer to members, the value transfer is the dollar benefit that Alaska USA's members receive from this not-for-profit financial cooperative through the lower rates on deposit or loans, the higher rates on deposits, and the lower fees that they would receive compared to competing financial institutions in our markets. I'm again pleased to report that in 2020, the value transfer that Alaska USA members received was almost $84 million for an average of $120 per member. You can see here in the dividends paid, this graph here reflects the amount of dividends that were paid to our members in 2020 and the steady growth over the last several years and the amount of dividends because of the increased interest rates that are paid on those deposit accounts. Our vision is to be the primary provider of financial services to Alaska USA members everywhere. Taking a look at that, you can see in Alaska, we have 278,000 members, but we're geographically dispersed in other markets. You can see in Washington, 168,000. California, almost 95,000. Arizona, close to 70,000. And then when you combine other US and overseas markets, that's close to 90,000. And when you add them all up, it's almost 700,000 members. We also serve many communities through service facilities, mostly a branch network. Throughout Alaska, that's 14 different communities. In Arizona, throughout Maricopa County, 8 separate communities. In California, we have 5 separate communities in the high desert and the San Bernardino County area. And lastly, in Washington, 20 different communities. All told, that's 47 different communities that Alaska USA services through these 4 different states. Here you can just see a quick slide of some of the individuals that were involved in our pandemic response and making sure that we could safely deliver those services through the branch network. Our IT staff, our facilities and security staff, our personnel staff, everyone worked together to make sure that we could continue to serve the members in a safe way. All told, when you combine all of our service facilities, we have 537, 69 branches, many of which are open multiple days out of the weekend, 6 and 7 day branches. We have ATMs, 436 branded ATMs. We also have a service center that operates 24/7, 365. It's not closed 1 minute of the year. Business and Commercial Services operates 5 offices. Our mortgage company operates 17 offices, and you add that with our 9 Alaska USA insurance brokerages, we have 537 separate service facilities. In addition to that, Credit Union maintains contracts with other service providers that allow our members to use 5,000 different shared branches to conduct transactions, as well as 55,000 surcharge ATMs, spread out not only through the continental US and Alaska, but into other countries as well. In terms of an overview, just briefly touching on the growth of the organization in terms of membership, we've now approached, like I said earlier, almost 700,000 members, tremendous growth from the end of the year 2019. Transactions grew substantially year over year. And while the amount of loans granted stayed relatively flat, you can see tremendous growth in the dollar amount of loans granted. And then I just want to briefly touch on loan delinquency, as you'll see growth there, which is primarily the result of a strategy where the credit union is buying out loans out of pools that if those loans have gone delinquent, we're able to buy those loans out, saving the credit union interest payments while those loans are delinquent. And when you strip that out, that strategy out, and we're confident that those loans will ultimately cure, but when you strip that out, our loan delinquency is under 50 basis points. And then just modest growth in the number of employees. In terms of transactions, when you break those down into the various channels that members prefer, you can see tremendous growth in the digital channels of Ultra Branch Mobile and our PC. Also in debit card transactions and many, many transactions over the phone. And as expected, and what we would anticipate in the midst of a pandemic and also following trends that we've been tracking for some time, slow reduction in transactions in our branches. In terms of financial performance, many people referred to 2020 as a roller coaster, and I think of a different analogy. I think of it being more along the lines of a turbulent plane ride, where we started off with a flight plan. We filed that flight plan. We knew where we were going, and that was our budget, and that was our strategic plan. And before the first quarter was over, we realized that this isn't going to be the plan that's going to get us to our destination. And so the result of that and the culmination of all of our efforts around business continuity and pandemic planning, we retooled the budget. We retooled our operating strategies around what we were going to do with the pandemic. And ultimately, we were able to land safely exactly where we had planned. We just ended up having to take a different route. And you'll see that in these financial results when you look at the operating income, operating expenses, our cost of funds, and ultimately what our top line revenue was and income from operations. It was essentially the same as it was the year prior. And that's after spending a tremendous amount of money making sure that the organization was resilient and able to respond to this global pandemic. When you subtract out our loan loss provision, which grew slightly over 2019, the financial results for the year were still stellar at $71.6 million. And when you see that graphically, you can see that it was almost the same as the year prior, which was again remarkable given the conditions of the year. And you can also see graphically the steady growth, particularly focusing on these last 3 years of the organization's financial performance. In terms of the organization's balance sheet, you can see tremendous growth. Quite a bit of this is the result of the stimulus payments that the government was able to distribute in order to ensure that the country didn't face a recession as a result of this pandemic. And ultimately, many other institutions experienced similar asset and deposit growth as Alaska USA, but you can see here the assets grew almost $1.4 billion in 1 year. The same for deposits, while loans only grew modestly up to $7 billion, and net worth, again, just modestly up to $86.3 million. These are those same numbers shown graphically. You can see the incredible growth in assets and deposits, while it's going to take some time for loans to catch up. Now, we don't stop there. As an organization that focuses on its communities that it does serve. Last year, nonprofits, like many other organizations, were very concerned about their ability to continue to operate. And Alaska USA wanted to make sure we stepped up and helped those nonprofit partners. And last year, we donated close to $700,000 to nonprofits in the communities that we serve. In addition to that, almost exclusively through efforts in our branch network, we were able to receive $140,000 in donations that we're able to turn around and give to local food pantries, and again, in a year of tremendous need. Now, it was much harder last year than it would have been in any other year. Our employees still found time where they could to donate their time as volunteers in nonprofit organizations that they care about, that they're passionate about. And almost 1,000 hours of time was donated. And lastly, we just wanted to make a quick comment that the organization, was paying attention to the information in the news around racial and social injustices, and the organization pledged $100,000 in donations to organizations that focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion within our industry. Last, I just want to thank the board for their steadfast leadership through all of this. I'd like to thank the membership for their loyalty and dedication and patience as we work through all of those things. And then I'd like to thank the employees, all the employees, and their perseverance and flexibility as we worked through all of this. I have just one other note I want to make before I turn the microphone back over to our chairman, and that's that if you have any questions, if you have any questions regarding the information in the presentation or any other questions for the credit union, board of directors, or the management team, please email them to board alaskausa.org, and please include your contact information so that we can respond after the meeting. Thank you, and that concludes my comments.
Thank you, Jeff. As there is no old business from last year's meeting, I will move to new business at this time. The only item of new business is the election of directors. The nominating committee's slate of candidates was announced in the October newsletter, along with procedures for members to qualify as a candidate in the petition process. Since no members qualified as a candidate by the petition method, and as there is one candidate for each available position on the board of directors, their election is uncontested. Unless there are objections, I will instruct the secretary to cast a unanimous ballot for the election of Bobby Alexander and Kent Berthium as to the 3-year board of director positions. I want to thank the membership for over 7 decades of support and participation in the credit union. I also want to congratulate and thank my fellow volunteer officials and all of the employees for their service to members and contribution to Alaska USA in 2020. The credit union exists to serve its members, but we cannot do that without each of the skilled and valuable employees working hard to make sure members have access to their money. I was inspired by Alaska USA's nearly 2,000 dedicated employees who continued to serve members during the pandemic, and we want to thank them for their extraordinary efforts. At this time, may I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second. Are there any objections? Seeing none, the motion is carried and the meeting is adjourned. Thank you for attending, and we hope to see you next year.